get started in just a couple moments here. Okay. Welcome to Utah Stories, my friends. This is a return to our live show here at Utah Stories. I want to do this live show on weekdays, right around now at 5 p.m. as often as I can. I think it's going to be at least 3 days a week. So check in at our channel and learn about the big hot button issues impacting Utah. That's what we cover here at Utah Stories. What we're looking at right now is what we've been doing the last 4 years, looking at the homeless situation on the streets, talking to a lot of homeless people, covering that topic from the grassroots up, and informing and inviting political leaders to come on the program to tell us what they are doing from the top down for the grassroots up. That's our number one area of interest still. Why should we care about homeless people and the homeless topic when we have thousands of cat videos on TikTok and Instagram? I absolutely love cat and dog videos, so I'm not immune to those enjoyments. Why should we care about that when we have hundreds of influencers who tell us where to go, what to eat, how to have fun? This is why you should care about the homeless issue, because these are our friends, our relatives, our colleagues. These are people who have basically fallen through the cracks, got addicted to opioids, many of them painkillers. Their addiction, it starts taking control and running in the driver's seat of their brain. And they are people who deserve our sympathy and our compassion. And why is this your problem? Why should you listen to this? Because the government is not going to solve this problem. The government is failing miserably at solving the problem. We see more and more homeless people on the streets of Salt Lake City. We see more and more accidental overdose deaths across the United States. I think that number from 2022 to 2023 actually went down a little bit, but that could be because these deaths are not going reported. As I will tell you much more about that in a little bit later in the program. I try to report this in a balanced way because I want to see the problem from both the political leaders' point of view, that Utah cannot become, and Salt Lake City cannot become a magnet for homeless people to come to because we are so compassionate, because we have, we offer permanent supportive housing here. We offer free apartments for people who are chronically homeless. We offer a lot of services. There is a lot of compassion in Utah. So I try to see it from that point of view. We don't want to become a homeless magnet for other states and cities to send their homeless people to. But at the same time, we need to be actively solving the problem. And the solution to the problem, if you followed this channel before, is not providing homes to the homeless. Now, what kind of uncompassionate person would say something like that? Like, why would I not embrace the housing first model? It is because that model has proven to be an abject failure over and over and over again. And I'm going to point that out also in this program today. I'm also going to point out how the police in Salt Lake City, despite our repeated attempts to get numbers and figures and accuracy about the death counts of the number of people dying on our streets who are homeless, they just simply do not seem interested. And to me, that is the height of hypocrisy. To protect and serve is their motto. They are public safety officers. If you are a public safety officer, and I say this directly with respect to Chief Mike Brown, then why is the number one statistic on your desk every day not how many people on our streets have died? Why would that not be the number one statistic that you would be tracking as the chief of police for Salt Lake City? I just want to ask him that question with respect. I honor the position of chief of police. I honor the position of mayor as well. But I would like to ask Mayor Mendenhall, why is it that the number one statistic you aren't tracking, as so much more taxpayer money is funneled into homeless housing, how effective this housing is? Why are you not examining Magnolia Apartments that you were involved in the ribbon cutting over almost 3 years ago with Pamela Atkinson? It was supposed to be, offer the homeless community dignity, getting them off the streets. Why are you not tracking how many of those people, those tenants in these apartments, are not using drugs anymore, are getting back on their feet and getting into jobs? Why are you not examining both that housing that we're putting our taxpayer dollars into, as well as Palmer Place Apartments, Wendell Court, Grace Mary Manor? These homeless housing units, which I just want to elaborate on first, are financed and funded by Shelter the Homeless, which is it's a great organization. I'm not going to condemn them. They have all sorts of permanent supportive housing units across the Wasatch Front, and they're owned by Shelter the Homeless, and they're managed by the Road Home. Now, I have tried to speak with the executive director of the Road Home many times, and if you watch this, I'm very respectful to everybody on this program, to just simply ask her one question. Why are you allowing homeless people to get off the streets, and then you put them up into what I would agree with you should be the number one thing to do, get people off the streets, but then the number two thing to do is to get them into rehab programs, get them off drugs. Why is that not a priority in Magnolia? How do I know that it's not a priority? Because 3 people who reside there have reached out to me to say, this place is absolutely awful. Everybody in here is using drugs every day. There are cockroaches everywhere. People are living in squalor in these apartments. One gentleman took all of the drywall out of his apartment, threw it out the window, and people are going crazy there. And look at the neighborhood around Magnolia Place Apartments. That neighborhood is deteriorated big time. A guy who owned a condominium across the street from Magnolia tried to sell that condominium, and he couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted to buy it. And so he basically decided either he's got to just board it up or give up on it. And it's just turned that neighborhood into a terrible place to be. And what gets me is the local media, and I'm calling out KSL News, Channel 4, Fox 13, the Salt Lake Tribune, the Deseret News. Those are the 5 major media outlets locally. They are not reporting on this. They're not going around that neighborhood talking to neighbors. They're not talking to the residents who are in Magnolia. They're not examining this topic. And I just don't know why. Why aren't they also asking the Salt Lake City Police Department, how many people are dying on the streets in Salt Lake City every year? I'm kind of amazed, because Utah Stories is mostly a magazine about where to go, what to do. I'm a journalist who started it. I'm very much interested in asking tough questions and trying to find answers. And this has been an ongoing question I've been trying to answer now for 4 years. 4 years. Basically, when COVID started, I thought, what could I deep dive into that I would get, very much interested in? And I found the homeless industrial complex, as I call it, very interesting. How these people are getting wealthy by not solving the problem, by basically enabling drug users to use drugs all day. And it just doesn't seem like they're interested in solving the problem, because their salaries are not based upon a solution. They can justify greater and greater salaries based on exacerbating a problem. Since when has that ever been a model that would possibly work? And so I did feel a bit of hope about 3-4 months ago when I heard Governor Cox give a speech at a Solutions Utah conference in which he said, we need accountability. We need to hold the resource providers of these homeless centers, these executives who run these operations, to be held accountable. And then we need to hold people accountable at a personal level. We need to see that the people receiving services are receiving the services they need to get basic job skills back, to get off drugs, to become members of our community once again, rather than these people getting stuck in a system which essentially produces inoperable citizens of our communities. And that's really what I see these permanent supportive housing units are doing. And so I got some comments recently on Instagram related to our coverage of reporting about 3 years ago. I kept hearing this over and over again from about a dozen homeless people I talked to, that there are serial killers or a serial killer among the homeless community, and the police aren't investigating it. So as for the serial killer component of it, I was a skeptic of that. I didn't necessarily believe it, but I just wanted to get the numbers from the Salt Lake City police. Okay, how many people are dying along the Jordan River? How many people are getting murdered? How many cases are you finding where there's might be foul play? I was not able to get that. As I said earlier in the program, the Salt Lake City Police Department essentially stonewalled our investigation. They said we don't keep tabs on that. And like I said, I just couldn't believe that murders or the deaths of people where foul play might be at work are not being investigated. And then I thought of it in terms of the police department. The homicide unit obviously only comes out when there is real suspicion of homicide. If you're talking about people who are drug addicts, homeless people, and then you treat, a lot of those deaths as homicides, you're just not going to have enough staff to examine all of those deaths. So I get that. But if you find a dead woman in a tent and a name is carved into her arm, as we showed in a story we did, several stories we did on Candace McCrae, you're not going to investigate the person who carved their name into her arm. You're just going to say, yeah, she OD'd, and it's too bad somebody carved the name into her arm. No big deal. Nothing to see here. I just cannot believe that. And then another earlier story that Eric Peterson did for the Utah Investigative Journalism Project was a young man recently homeless, was murdered, but the police just didn't have the time or resources to investigate his murder. And so what I find very troubling is that these people, what I find is a very common story among the homeless community is they burn the bridges with their family, right? And as Barry Egolf, who's the father of Candace McCrae, told us on the podcast, when you have a kid, you've put him in rehab over and over and over again, the family gets exhausted, right? If your loved one is addicted to drugs, there's only so much you can do for them before you kind of throw up your arms and say, okay, I give up. You're going to have to, I guess I'm going to have to come to peace with the fact that you're homeless now, you're a drug addict, you're on the streets. That's what the most common story is when I talk to homeless folks. The families have given up on them, right? So what I don't understand is then with that community of people who are essentially, wandering around our streets in Salt Lake City, and I'm not saying every homeless person is like that. That's definitely not the case. But that community of people who are drug addicted, who are out there on the streets suffering the elements, wouldn't we want to at least not allow these people to so easily fall victim to predators? It was so clear this Candace McCrae fell victim to a predator who basically made her either his sex slave or was sex trafficking her so she could keep getting her fixes of drugs. And she stayed in this tent, as Ty Bellamy reported to us, the last 4 days of her life, getting fix after fix after fix of drugs. And then she was definitely not well. And there was no police help, no support. There was just this gradual going down the tube of her life, and there was no support for her. And she overdosed on drugs, and that story is extremely common. But that death doesn't get reported as anything of a suspicion. That doesn't get reported any details that she was trafficked out to this one particular man, that he was trafficking her. There was no investigation. And I think that kind of behavior and attitude towards the homeless community needs to stop. I think the police and support groups should get more involved into the community. And I don't believe that the answer, this is contrary, in my opinion, to a lot of the people we've had on this program, is that these people should be camping along the Jordan River, should be camping in our parks. I don't believe that we should be sustaining their drug addiction and enabling them. What they need is to get into treatment programs and get off drugs and get off the streets. And our parks and the places where we recreate should be free of needles, free of drug trafficking, free of sex trafficking, and that should not exist. It should not exist anywhere. That is a major solution to the whole problem. And a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're uncompassionate. You don't care about them." No, I don't think it's compassionate to let somebody slowly die or get victimized on the streets. To allow a person to experience this soft, cushy landing instead of the rock bottom that they need to experience to start recovery, I don't think the soft, cushy landing of a death spiral is compassionate. So I tend to get worked up about these things because I have looked at it for so long. But it's about time we start counting the number of homeless deaths. We know it was 104,000 people died in 2022 of accidental drug overdoses. That certainly Utah had its fair share, probably well over 2,000 accidental drug overdose deaths. And it's about time we look at the problem of the free flow of fentanyl into our communities and stop that from happening. I mean, I talked to police around the Magnolia Apartments. It seems like they're just kind of throwing up their arms like there's not much we can do about it. When fentanyl is so cheap, so ubiquitous, so abundant, and so inexpensive, they're just going to find buyers everywhere. And I do not think that is the solution to the problem. So I want to encourage you to check out some of our previous stories and content. I just had Robin Pendergrast, a New York Times photographer, with a new book out called Homeless Hell in Salt Lake City. I highly encourage you to check out that episode, check out his book. Check out the stories we did on Candace McRae. I really got to give a shout out to MJ Jukes, who did such a fantastic job following that story, writing a story about Candace last winter for us. And I do appreciate that it feels like we have a good sanctioned campground that's opening up in October. We're going to be going to the opening of that. And surprisingly enough, got to get some water. I shouldn't say surprisingly enough. I should say so grateful that the state homeless coordinator, Wayne Niederhauser, is going to come on this program. He said he's coming on. He's going to answer some of our very difficult questions. We have a whole series of difficult questions. For example, why was the Ramada Inn property, which was set aside for homeless housing, given away to or sold off to the Larry H. Miller family for their dreams of a ballpark? And questions along the lines that I just don't see the mainstream local media is asking. And we want to have more people who are in the homeless coverage, local media, coming on the program to explain what they're finding is happening. and just presenting the truth, the unvarnished truth, unbiased truth about the hot button issues. Another big series we've got coming up is on book banning in Utah. We've had 3 guests on. Those are recorded. We're just getting them edited about this silly idea that we got to ban all sorts of books in Utah. The New York Times did a story on Utah. We've got banned now. The Catcher in the Rye, one of my favorite books I read in high school, is on the banned list. And I don't quite understand. There's a statewide ban on certain books in schools. And then there's district-wide bans. And then there's banned books or, books that are removed from shelves in public schools. We're going to share all those details with you. It's kind of a tough topic to navigate because you kind of wonder why not just allow schools to have their own jurisdictional decision-making process. But we'll get into that. And the main question is, are schools, this is why, the Utah State Legislature jumped on this topic, are schools banning books because teachers and librarians are using them to groom kids to becoming homosexual or trans? Is that why the state legislature is banning books, and is there any legitimacy to that claim? So stay tuned to Utah Stories, and if you like this content, you like what we're doing, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and consider subscribing to Utah Stories magazine, the voice of local Utah. For the last 15 years, I've loved bringing this magazine and had the privilege and honor to be publishing it in print for 15 years. But we are in the process of producing a brand new magazine, a brand new title, Faces of Utah. It's a beautiful full-size magazine mailed out to a lot of the most expensive homes in Utah. It will be available for free to some of the certain drop-off points, but we've got feature stories about Kyle Whittingham and Brandon Fugel, and then incredible entrepreneur success stories about a lot of the people you might know and have been aware of. The Utah Salsa Queen. We've got a story about Walcott Optical, Squatters in Wasatch, and we're just super pleased to be able to share all of these really cool stories about business owners that did some incredible things, and also artists. And we're just wrapping up our final 4 weeks of sales, and this is going to hit the stands in the middle of November. And we're going to have a mechanism for you to subscribe to this if you want to get a copy in your hands as well. You can become a member at Utah Stories. All members will be receiving a copy of Faces of Utah magazine. That's $5 a month to support our content and coverage, because we want to continue to ask these really difficult questions and essentially shake up the hornet's nest. Like, we are the beehive state, but that nest needs to be shaken up. And more of our political leaders need to be held more accountable for their collusion with the big developers. As we all know, if you look at the state legislature, about 80% of them are developers in the housing market. So why is there no affordable housing if they're all developers? We had on a wonderful interview with Utah Housing Czar, and I encourage you to check out that interview as well. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.